Hi, this is Ian Adama, the writer and director of the fan film Moon Knight Origins. You're listening to the Into the Night Moon Knight podcast.
Yes, welcome back, loony listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. This is episode 228, and you are with two of your Hyperactivity Khonshus, one of them being Ray. Hello, howdy, how you going? And joining me for this idle chat at the top of the week is slightly under the weather, but still up vibe, Rebecca. Rebecca, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I think I've got a bad cold.
Mm-hmm.
I spent the morning checking on COVID symptoms.
Oh,
and
yes.
None of the symptom checkers think that I need to go for a test.
Oh,
so
good.
I've done a lateral flow test, but they're supposed to be asymptomatic. But they came up negative, so I think it's just a cold.
Okay. Haven't got a fever.
I'm keeping an eye on.
Okay.
I've got no fever. I've got no cough. I've got my sense of smell and taste.
Yes.
I'm literally just sneezing non-stop. So apologies in advance if I start sneezing. I've got cough sweetened because obviously it's giving me a bit of a sore throat.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so apologies for any audio, and obviously I'm sounding a bit husky probably.
Well, the listeners aren't privy to what we were talking about before, Rebecca, but I hope you do. I hope you do sneeze. I hope you do sneeze multiple times. We'll see what we can do back in the lab.
Very excited about my sneezing right now. You will find out why if I sneeze.
Anyway, loony listeners, thank you so much for joining us. We've got a very special idle chat. Actually, it's in collaboration with one of the other loonies that has joined our community, Lena. So a big shout out to Lena as well, and the system that Lena is part of. Lena is part of a system. They have dissociative identity disorder. So I've just got to make sure I say that properly. And we're going to do.
You did good.
We're going to do something called Just Understanding Dissociative Identity Disorder. This is part one, and we've got a lot of, I guess, information from Lena, Rebecca, which proved to be, a bit of an eye-opener, and it's great to kind of get into it. Something a little bit...
Super interesting, and it's great to have someone with expertise and personal experience explain how it works, and also then tie it into Moon Knight.
Yeah. So, listeners, in case you were curious to learn a bit more, in case you were wondering, how is it represented in the comics, just stick with us and we'll kind of go through some of them, some of the issues that Lena references. Before that, though, there's a bit of a change here. Sponsors, of course, our greatest patronies, those listed as co-producers and executive producers on each of our episodes. A big thank you to our patronies. A huge welcome to our latest patronie, Drew Tombz. Thank you so much, Drew.
Great name.
Yeah. Drew's hit the Spectre tier, so my gosh, Drew, you are so generous. Thank you so much. So Drew is in good company with the likes of Daniel, Drew, as I just said, Justin, Derek, Kyle, Wayne, Jordan, Josh, James, Anthony, and Michael. Thank you so much, all of you, for all your contributions. We've got kind of new sponsors now because Drew has reached that Spectre tier, and I'd like to shout out Tombz on SoundCloud, so Tombz with a Z or a Z, depending where you're from, and also LURKMUSICK with a C and a K on Bandcamp. Both of those are accounts run by Drew, and he produces and he writes music ranging from sci-fi, horror inspired kind of soundscapes to dance music that he produces, so worth checking out. Of course, Fringe Knight by Daniel Doing, an original indie comic based on Erie, Pennsylvania's very own mysterious superhero. Go check out a very creative loony there. And finally, of course, Dreamland Comics, the superhero superstore. So yes, Rebecca, plenty here, plenty.
We are blessed.
Okay.
Thank you all. No, I'm not even joking. But thank you all. I mean, it's like, it's really, really appreciated.
Oh no, very very
And
much.
I'm definitely going to check out that music because I need
too.
some more music to work to. So
Well, for sure. Great stuff. A lot of creative people in the community. Now, Rebecca, white noise. We've just got some news before we hit our stride with understanding VOD.
some little news, just some little news that dropped this week.
I'm surprised.
Tiny stuff.
Exactly, little stuff. I'm surprised the images I put in the prompt sheet weren't found out by Disney Plus and taken down.
I'm surprised you've not been sniped. Yeah.
But anyway, Rebecca, do you want to lead on this one then? This is a big one.
Yeah, so this is a reported leak of the Moon Knight costume for the Disney Plus show. I'm sure if you've not seen it, it is being taken down by Disney. So, I mean, but a lot of people, it's around the place. You know, you'll probably be able to find it. And it shows Moon Knight in a bathroom.
Or a tomb, as you said, Rebecca, didn't you?
No, I mean, look, the costume clearly is mummy inspired.
It is, yeah.
And they've also the concept art was also leaked, and the concept art is pretty much the same as the costume, but we get to see the bottom half of it, and we also get to see a cape. And it's much whiter. Like the concept art is very white. The actual image looks quite dark grey. But we know a lot can be changed in CGI and post-production, and that it's very hard to shoot white.
Yes.
So, like, you know, for example, very famous Singing in the Rain. The rain scene was all milk because it's very hard to...
Really?
Yeah, because white does weird things on camera, and it can look transparent, so...
Okay.
I imagine there'll be a bit of post-production here if they want to light it up. I mean, I quite like it. I think there was a bit of a shock at first because it's not a straight from comics thing. Although it does look like some of the comicsy stuff we've seen that's been a bit more Egyptian linked. And I was saying that I think maybe this might be in an initial costume.
Yes.
That is maybe from the tomb of Khonshu because it looks so mummy inspired.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I thought as well. I like your idea as well, Rebecca, in Discord. I think you mentioned it could potentially be like a mummified zombie or something that Mark fights and draws inspiration from to make his costume, you know, so to speak.
I mean, either way, I like it.
Yeah.
Like, so, it's definitely very different from any of the other MCU costumes, which is very cool.
Yeah, look, I like it as well, and I want to go on the record. I think it looks really good. I had a shall we say, a big shout out to Rick, the Rick Ball special. I had a lengthy discussion with Rick. Rick loves it, and that's fantastic. I said, look, I think it looks cool. I don't think it's probably his suit. I think it's like a lead up to it, and that kind of led to some delicious discussion. But I've heard that we might be getting a suit as well. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
Wink.
Wink. Yeah. But
I think the weirdest thing I find, like the weirdest thing I find about it is the chest moon is kind of being pulled. It's like either being
it looks detachable
or being pulled on one side by bandages.
Yeah.
Which I think is an interesting look. Like it's not a sort of design choice, whereas the one on his hood, I love his hood and his
hood's
mask.
cool. His hood actually looks cool. I mean, because let's face it, I think we're all worried that the hood would make him look pretty dinky, but this hood actually
it looks very good. Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I
think that chest moon is a bit weird.
Yeah.
Weird. Yeah, but I don't hate it.
No, I don't hate it as well. And look, the thing that I'm kind of erring away from that, it is his actual, because some people, think this is pretty cool, this is his actual costume. Call me Mr. Practical, but I can't see Mark saying, hang on, let me just whip up into my costume and have to put all those kind of old raggedy bandages on there. You know what I mean? So it seems like it's... That's
kind of where maybe it's something that he gets inspiration from.
Exactly, yeah.
It may be the initial one that he escapes a tomb in.
It could be Khonshu.
I don't know. It could be Khonshu.
Yeah, that could be...
It could be another avatar of Khonshu anyway.
Yeah. I mean, again...
I'd like when we get Khonshu to get the full-on skeleton head.
Oh yeah, I like that as well.
Yeah,
I mean the color as well, Rebecca. You're mentioning. I know people were talking a lot about the color, and look, it's not. Again, I think you said a lot of things can be done in post production. And look, if they're meant to be, raggedy bandages, then they're not going to be pristine white, are they? As well. So
no, and I think almost all the Marvel cape type things are done in post production as well. So.
Yep.
Because they're so hard to handle on set, actual cape. But the concept art is amazing and very sort of pharaoh looking.
It reminds me, it harks a bit more to the Fist of Khonshu, which I like. I mean, it doesn't have the bling, but it's got it's like really like.
I mean, they could add bling though. Right?
They could. They could
add a bit of bling.
Yeah, it's not unheard of that Mark and Moon Knight has been in bandages, I guess. I mean, I did say to Rick, it has nothing to do with him. Granted, Earth X and all that, and even the Warren Ellis run with the bird armor, it has Mark in partial bandages as well. So it's there.
I do agree with you, though. It is a weird costume to have to change into.
Yeah, exactly. Unless he's mystically he can do the animated Spider Woman and twirl around.
We literally have no idea. Oh, that'd be amazing. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
But but it also reminds us, if you see how quickly it trended, how quickly they started taking it down.
Mm-hmm.
Just another reminder that we know so little about the show.
Yeah, exactly.
It's even after the last investor call was last week, when they were talking about Shang-Chi and the window, and now it looks like Ms. Marvel's going to be delayed, which means Moon Knight might not be when I wanted it to be. That's okay.
Yeah.
I know. I'm still hoping that we get, maybe Ms. Marvel in January and
the first.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I want Moon Knight for my birthday, so we're aiming for March 9th, everyone.
There's going to be some hefty omnibuses and hardcovers coming out around that time anyway, Rebecca. So
pretty much all of them are coming out between February and April. So I mean, but even if it opens in April, that will still be fine.
Yeah,
I don't really mind, but I still think we're getting it in spring, or that's the aim.
Yeah,
and if they have to shift this Marvel, then it shouldn't. I don't think there's anything. Well, they have the Book of Boba Fett to do in December. So who knows?
Of course. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, it's great.
What do you think, Rebecca, of Disney taking? Is this confirmation then? So a shout out to Sarah and my co-host from the Spider Woman podcast, To Know Hers to Fear Her. DCMA's, I can't remember, digital, copyright millennial act.
Yeah.
Does this mean
that is?
Yeah. Does that mean, you reckon? Is it confirmed then? Are they confirming, by default?
Well, I read this. I read this morning that apparently they found the source of the leak and they're going to prosecute.
Oh, so that again it means.
Look, the chances are it's a leak of something.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that's all it means. All it means is this picture is from Marvel and they weren't ready for it to be out.
Yes.
When it was out.
Yeah. Oh gosh, they're going to come down hard on whoever leaked these out.
Yeah. Who was it? There was a leak on one of the Spider-Man films, and the guy lost his job. Wasn't it? What was that? Was that Spider-Man: Far From Home? There was a leak of one of the films, and again, it wasn't a massive leak, but there was something, and somebody lost their job for it.
Is it worth it? Is it worth it? No one still knows that person's name.
Look, the chances are that it's not worth it, and that's why you don't get more leaks.
Yeah, exactly. So whoever's done this,
but,
well, I don't know.
It does seem to have only increased excitement for it, though. So it does. Overall, it's probably a bonus and
a calculated leak.
They shouldn't go too hard. They should just sack something. That's good enough,
Anyway, so listeners, if you're fortunate enough to have seen the images, let us know.
I think they're on our Facebook page, unless Ray's taken them all down.
I've taken it down. Fair. I know. Sorry, I am a Dudley do-gooder. So,
Yes.
apologies. People got their comments in, which was great. So good stuff, loonies. But yeah, just better safe than sorry. You know?
I'm absolutely sure you'll be able to find them still,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people on Twitter offering to DM them to people.
Oh,
So,
God,
like,
there you go. So yeah, it shouldn't be too hard to find. But if you missed out on the initial kind of buzz, go check him out. Track him down and let us know what you think. Yeah,
and also, look, I think it makes it 1,000 times more likely that on Disney Plus Day in November, we get to see a first glimpse of Moon Knight.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Because that's when Disney
gosh.
gets to respond. Oh yeah, so like that's the other bit of news that came out of the investor call is there's going to be a Disney Plus Day on November the 12th.
Ooh.
Where they highlight Disney, Marvel, and Star Wars content coming up on Disney Plus. I think this leak probably means that we'll get our first glimpse of something Moon.
I'll be happy with just a teaser. I don't care. Just give me something.
Yeah, I mean, like if they're being funny, it'll be him in a white suit or something. You know, like they like you don't know what we're gonna do, but even if it's just that 10-second sizzle reel or something,
yes.
I think well, so that's the date for the diaries. I think it's November the 12th.
Do you think it's worthy of?
I think it is November the 12th because I made a really bad joke about dates and got the maths really badly wrong.
What?
So
what 11, 12 or something?
And I was making a really I can't even. I'm not even going to go into how bad my maths was on it. But, so we're all tuned in for Disney Plus Day.
Should we do a watch party? Maybe we should try and do. I've been
we should.
Been trying to do one. I mean, it depends on. I mean, we're all over the corners of the globe.
Especially after the Eternals, so I hope.
Ooh.
So, yes, it'll be. So I hope there's some exciting news.
Oh my gosh, plenty of stuff happens between
the only person who knows. Yeah.
Yeah. My God. Cool. I can't wait. Well, yeah. So we got that to look forward to, and hopefully, maybe not some more leaks. You never know. So so there you go. But that was a pretty big one. That caused a bit of a stir in the community. So check that out. And on the back of that as well, Rebecca, the second bit of news, Ethan Hawke shared his thoughts on his role as his mysterious villain that he plays.
Yeah.
Now, he was interviewed on the Late Night with Seth Meyers' show, and Seth remarked that Ethan Hawke he looked very David Koresh, and Hawke said, "Oh, very good pickup." Ethan Hawke said, "Very nice pickup." That is who he's been kind of trying to, I guess, fashion himself after. So, Rebecca, David Koresh, cult leader, any other insights now into who he might play?
I mean, it's looking Sun King.
Yeah.
But with the way Marvel goes, I'm not making any super predictions. Yeah. And I know people have mixed feelings about that. All I'll say is I think, as I've said about the Bemis run before, is he threw a lot of ideas out there. It doesn't mean that Marvel have to stick to exactly the ideas you got in the comic.
No.
And I think the Sun King was and could be a compelling character.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
As an antagonist to Moon Knight.
Yes.
I think when he first appeared, we were very excited about the concept.
Yeah.
Maybe it didn't pay out exactly as we'd liked it to, but remember, the MCU is not following comics.
That's right.
Like massively, so they can pick and choose. And
right.
I mean, they could have just taken another villain and made him Koresh-like. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to predict too much because they can be really boringly obvious sometimes, and then they can be like totally random other times. So
yeah. I mean, I've been reading some of the comments as well on various Moon Knight sites. Just not our community, and people have been saying. A few of them have been saying, they don't mind. They like the idea of the Sun King. Exactly as you're saying, Rebecca. They like the idea of him, just how he was kind of, his journey through the Bemis run maybe didn't go as well as people had hoped with the idea of the Sun King. So he's definitely got there. Look, the only thing that really, after reading that article, I thought, okay, yeah, it's got to be the Sun King. The only thing that's kind of stopping me is that, I got a response from Jason Burrows, who, for those of you who don't know, is the artist on the Bemis run.
Yeah.
And I don't know where, I don't know where he gets his information from or whatever. I tend to believe him because he's in the industry and he worked on the book. And he says that it's definitely not Sun King, that they won't be using anything from the Bemis run. Now, I don't know the backing for that, but it's like, okay, well, if it's not the Sun King, the mystery's still up there. So, yeah, I mean, that's just a little...
I think Black Spectre's also
Carson Knowles.
Up for grabs. I think the profile.
Khonshu again, as well, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm kind of... I think, they're all possibilities. Mm-hmm. I think probably the profile would be my next guess.
Profile would be cool. Oh, yes.
But again, it would take some reimagining. They're all I don't think anything fits perfectly with it. The truth, I guess, but that's also Bemis Ron. So
yeah, I mean, they are going to look. I guess we have to expect that there potentially will be changes to it. I mean, if you look at all the Disney Plus shows to date and the MCU in general, there are always tweaks to. They keep the thread and the essence of the character, but there's always little tweaks here and there that differentiates between the comics. So, if we do get like the profile, we get Black Spectre, just be prepared, loonies, that it might not be exactly as you see on the comic book paper. That's all. So, it could be a new character. I don't know.
Could be whoever Jed McKay's writing.
Yeah. Ooh.
I mean, he seemed culty from the two panels we got of him.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly. And look, finally, before we get into understanding DID, Rebecca, the one bit of news came from our fellow Hyperactivity Khonshu.
I know.
How cool is this?
From nowhere and dropped a news bomb.
Jeez, he's like, I don't know. He's like, who's that fast? Who's the fast? Is Achilles? I can't remember. He just comes down from the sky, drops in a news bomb, and then off he goes. Khonshu, we love you. Marvel Unmatched has announced. Unmatched has announced that there's a Marvel game. So Mondo Games that kind of do this thing, and I don't know, did you check out Connor's YouTube link?
No, I meant to.
It's so funny. It is so funny. Check it out. It's an English guy. Oh, he's so funny. I don't know. He should be on TV, that guy. But he goes through the game and explains it in a very humorous way, because I wanted to learn more about the game, Unmatched. It's apparently a 2-player and upwards game. Apparently it's a lot is left to chance, so don't expect it to be an ultra strategic thing, but it's still a lot of fun. He highly recommended it. I
think the character groupings are really odd for the Moon Knight one.
Oh yeah, so let's so there are 4 games coming out. And so for the Moon Knight one, it's called Redemption Row, and it features Luke Cage, Ghost Rider, and Moon Knight. So that's pretty cool. So
why the hell is Luke Cage there?
I don't know.
Like, why is that not Blade?
That's true. Yeah.
Like, it's so weird to me that it's Luke Cage. Like,
yeah, because if you look at the next one, Hell's Kitchen. It's just
really weird. Yeah. Daredevil, Elektra, Bullseye.
Very
100% makes sense.
100%, yeah, exactly.
Teens, okay, Ms. Marvel, Squirrel Girl, Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah.
Maybe not the ones I'd pick, but they're all teen heroes.
They're all teens, yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
And for King and Country is another odd one.
Yeah,
Black Widow, Black Panther, Winter Soldier. So for King, okay, Black Panther, and Country, Black Widow and Winter Soldier, Russia. I mean, why if you're going to do for King and Country, I would have expected Captain America.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
At the very least. Like, why is Black Widow there? Like, I don't know. Anyway, they're fun characters that people love, and
yes.
I'm not going to come down on it. I'm just saying my initial reaction to those is like, huh.
Yeah. Have you played Unmatched before?
No.
No, okay.
Come on. Do I look like the kind of person who's got any experience doing anything interesting?
You played a lot of board games, which are all really cool. All games I don't want to play, but yeah. But yeah, so this one, go check it out. Apparently these games are quite cheap, and Mondo Games, one of the takeaways I got from the video, I mean, stunning artwork. Like the guy's saying, just get it for the box and what's in it, because Mondo, very kind of hip and kind of trendy and very visually. And what got me was very cheap, so it's not expensive, and it could be bought quite easily. So yeah, I'm considering buying it, especially the Moon Knight one, and if that goes well. I definitely
want to get it if the art's good.
Yeah.
Whether I play it or not is
just have it for the art, the lovely box put on the shelf. Yeah. Exactly. I've got the incidentally, Rebecca, I've got the Ninjak versus the Valiant Universe board game.
I didn't do that one.
Yeah,
I thought about it. I got their RPG. So.
Okay. Well, I only got this one because it's like you can play it as a one-person player, and I know that sounds very, very lonely and pathetic, but like,
no, that's cool.
Yeah, I got it for one person, but I can't say I've actually played it yet.
No,
it looks nice.
That's kind of what I've heard from a lot of people, is they've never actually played it.
Yeah, I'll have to find an incentive to. But anyway, that's the news, Rebecca. Unless there's any other little tidbits that secret news pieces that you haven't told me about, which would be good for the listeners. No, I think
Disney Plus Day was probably it.
Yeah, okay. So. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah. Fantastic. That's a big one. So yeah, let's try to do a watch party. I'm looking for platforms to do it on. I don't know. We'll see what we can do. If anyone is interested, I might throw it out there. See if anyone's interested. Again, we're all from different parts of the world, so it might be a bit difficult, but there you go.
After the murder of his acrobat parents, young Dick Grayson would go on to become Robin the Boy Wonder, the first partner of Batman. Years later, he would strike out on his own as leader of the Teen Titans, and then as a solo hero of his own, who the world would come to know as Nightwing. Are you a fan of Dick Grayson and his many incarnations as Robin and Nightwing and even the Batman himself? Well then please come join me and my co-host Kristen every week on the Capes and Lunatics podcast as we go through the history of one of the greatest heroes of all time. You think you know Dick Grayson? Well, you don't know Dick.
Hello, everyone. This is Steve Huff. I'm the fight choreographer, and we'll be playing Mark Spector, Moon Knight, and Jake Lockley in Moon Knight Origins. And you're listening to the Into the Night podcast.
Anyway, Rebecca, let's get into our idle chat. Understanding DID, Part 1. So a big thank you again to Lena. So Lena will be periodically sending us articles just to kind of throw in, elucidate us about DID.
Yeah, help explain it for us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as you said, Rebecca, at the beginning, to tie it into the comics. So what I thought would be best is that we did get this article from Lena and Rebecca. Why don't we just go through it? We'll just read it. It's not too long. And that's a cough. I'm waiting for a sneeze, Rebecca.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to.
Waiting.
Trying not to.
that's all right. Just let it out.
I can't stop. So
Have you got a pop filter? You need a sneeze guard. That's fine.
You don't have a sneeze guard. Yeah.
So let's read this out, Rebecca. Maybe just like a paragraph each, and if anything pops up. Lena did say if we had any questions, we can come back to her. Look, I thought we can just raise it on this episode, and maybe then she can respond that way. So, okay, so this is an introduction, Loonies. Rebecca, I'm going to take the very short first paragraph, if that's cool.
Of course, you are. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Elena opens with, "Hello, fellow Looney listeners. This is Lena, and as promised, I'm here to give you my perspective on Moon Knight as someone who has dissociative identity disorder myself. Well, ourselves. I'd like to start by going back to the basics, both with Moon Knight and DID.
A good place to start when it comes to the basics of DID is the official criteria for diagnosis of DID in the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, which is the book that most mental health professionals use for diagnosis. There's 5 criteria. 1, 2 or more distinct identities or personality states are present, each with its own relatively enduring pattern of perceiving, relating to, and thinking about the environment and self.
Just stop you there, Rebecca. So then, if we're immediately going to just tie that into Moon Knight, tick. I mean, he's got more than 2 distinct identities. Yep.
2. Amnesia must occur, defined as gaps in the recall of everyday events, important personal information, and/or traumatic events.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. Does Mark have this? Well, the traumatic event he does later on.
I mean, I think as I think we're going to discuss overall, comics can be a bit hit and miss about.
Absolutely,
they're not ticking them off because, as I think Lena gets into earlier, like there's an interesting history of when Mark actually was said to have DID, and all the and as we as a people have learned more about mental health, when we stopped calling it wrong things like schizophrenia and various other names and things that were wrong, and started understanding it, and like the people writing the comics would not have gone through a mental health training or awareness thing, so like they're not gonna get it all right. So so back to the definition. 3, the person must be distressed by the disorder or have trouble functioning in one or more major life areas because of the disorder.
Again, just kind of trying to link this to Moon Knight, I guess you can argue...
Big tick. He's quite often distressed by it,
Exactly. And, well, if you look at major life areas, his relationship with Marlene, that sort of thing, it's caused definite ripples in his life.
Yeah. The next one's the biggie, an interesting one. 4, the disturbance is not part of normal cultural or religious practices.
Yes.
Which it's not. It's not for Mark, but there is an extra religious tie-in.
Yes.
But they're not his religious practice.
No.
Yeah. And 5, the symptoms cannot be due to direct physiological effects of a substance, such as blackouts or chaotic behavior during alcoholic intoxication, or a general medical condition, such as complex partial seizures.
And for those fans of Moon Knight Core and Moon Knight and his ketamine, we can now dispel that as having any sort of ties with it, whether it did or not. I just wanted to get that in there. But yeah, so those 5, Rebecca, those 5, I guess, criteria for DID, I guess clearly states out what you must have in order to be, diagnosed with. But we'll see later on that there's a lot more to it. It's a really complex sort of disorder, and
manifests differently in different people.
Yes,
which is why there's a lot of 2 or more. There's how it comes about, things like that. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to just jump straight into, so what Lane has actually also given both Rebecca and I's additional reading. Actually, Lane has given us a lot of material. Thank you, Lena. Haven't been able to go through all of it, but there's one in particular that was very useful. It's called Beauty After Bruises, and it's a non-profit organisation in Pennsylvania, and they deal with the survivors of childhood trauma and DID. So what I wanted to just say, though, as well as that, as you're saying, Rebecca, it manifests differently. One of the main things that was an eye-opener for me was, unlike schizophrenia, which is a neurodegenerative disease, DID is a trauma-based one, so it's very different in that sense.
It's very interesting to me because, like I was saying to Ray just before we started the show, is like one of my best friends has got schizophrenia, so I almost learned first that schizophrenia was different to how we'd at one point talked about Mark, before I learned what the actual, the sort of like what we now call DID.
Yeah.
So,
And
it was more like, no, he definitely doesn't have schizophrenia before,
Yes.
like, you know.
And I mean, we were talking about before, again, off air, and what you actually mentioned earlier on, Rebecca, back in the day, mental issues and mental illnesses it wasn't that talked about that much, people weren't aware.
There was a massive misunderstanding of almost all of it, and it's like everyone was just too scared of it.
Yeah. So
I think it's so much healthier now that we're in a place where we understand that, like, these are things. These are, like, people, like where you would have had the only understanding of DID, like somebody watching Sybil.
So I read that as well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, I watched it as a kid at school and was absolutely, like, traumatized.
I have no idea.
Whole...
What is Sybil? Like, never researched yours.
It's based on a real story.
Okay.
Of a girl who had, I don't even know how many, a lot of alters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an extremely traumatic story. And they made a film of it with Sally Field.
Oh.
And I watched it way too young. And there's some really, really awful stuff in there.
Oh, wow.
But, like, it just became everyone who either read it or I think the film is probably what made people then go and read the book.
Okay.
And but it was this big sort of cultural touch point of people going, oh, this is the sort of correlation between trauma and the alters, but it's a really extreme version where the trauma is unbelievably awful in every, and I'm not saying any trauma isn't awful, but this is like unbelievably, like,
gosh,
give you nightmares awful, and where I think it was one of the most alters they'd had at the time.
Oh, wow.
It was like there was that many. It was just a really big case, and it just happened to be a very successful film, I guess, and then everyone went to read the book, which is why it then coloured a lot of the views of, like, the whole situation, which is obviously not how it is for most people.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if it is a trauma-based thing, it doesn't have to be, like, trauma is... I don't even know how to say it. I don't want to, like... but there's like, there's lots of like, okay, so, like, if you tie it into Moon Knight, like, there's trauma and there's finding out that the rabbi is a Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
Which
came later on, very, very much later on.
Obviously, it's happened in, like, one of the most recent ones, but like, like, you can have a traumatic incident without it being this, like, worst thing you can possibly imagine traumatic incident.
Yeah,
and I think that's the difference. Is like, like, also what's traumatic for one person isn't necessarily a traumatic experience for someone else, and it depends on their personality and everything else surrounding it is like what counts as trauma.
Yeah. What frightens me,
unless you're getting to those big extremes, and, like, I don't think we should always look at it at the extremes, and I think that's where Sybil was damaging in a way, is that it made it very scary. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what frightens me as well and again, you're talking about the number of alters. Again, from that Beauty After Bruises article that Lena forwarded on, what we see is a bit of a myth that kind of goes against Moon Knight and Mark Spector, is that it's more common to have just a few alters. Apparently, they commonly range between the teens to the 20s, the amount, and they can even go up to 30 or 40 different alters. So, Mark Spector's only got, 4? Or 5, which is not as much. And what frightens me, Rebecca, as well, is that, again, and I could be totally wrong, so Lena, please pull me up if I am wrong, these alters spring up from the repeated trauma, so whether that is the trauma being repeated, or maybe it's just the reenactment in the mind of the trauma that actually produces the alter. I mean, that's a very kind of harrowing thing to think, that an individual has to go through that. But like I said, like, different trauma. I think as Lena gets into further in this article, is like different, like, what's trauma for one person, and it's also true. Yeah.
Well, if we carry on through the article, I think we'll get to where some of these differentiations come in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Lena continues, now of course, that's just, as you might say, the bare bones of it. The actual experience of living with DID is a lot more complex and as varied as the human race. For instance, the identities that exist within the mind of someone with DID are generally referred to as alters, but I've heard lots of different terms from various people with DID that I've known, such as parts, personalities, identities, inner family, headmates, teammates, the troops, etc. Personally, we usually use either alters or parts, although we do also think of each other as an internal family. A DID system, which is the term most people with DID and therapists use when talking about the sum of our parts, can include alters of different genders, races, nationalities, sexual preferences, religions, etc., and can even include non-human alters such as animals, elves, aliens, vampires, or even a certain Egyptian god. So this, Rebecca, just it branches out furthermore as well. Like, again, I did not assume that it would go beyond human, you know. I guess.
Yeah, I don't think I would have. I think that was the surprise to me. I wasn't surprised about the different genders and races.
Me too. Yeah.
But the non-human ones is actually very interesting to know that that's not hugely atypical. I mean, it's like we don't know how typical it is, and I'm assuming it's not typical. But
yeah. I mean, assuming the sorry, Rebecca, just again, and I'm no psychologist and stuff, but I guess with the trauma and the ways to counter that and to defend against that, I guess the human mind, can draw on anything that I think that's what we're coming to. Yeah,
is how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
So why do our alters take the forms they do? It all comes down to the reason why DID exists in the first place, which is trauma. Specifically, early childhood trauma, almost always severe and repeated, although I've heard that it's possible for a DID system of only 2 alters to come about from a single incident of childhood trauma. The reason why DID always starts in childhood is that our sense of one unified self doesn't fully solidify until about the age of 6 to 9 years old or so. Until then, it's somewhat malleable, and when we're exposed to severe trauma, our sense of identity can diverge so that one self can be present for the trauma while the other is protected within the mind. Once this pattern of dealing with trauma is established, it becomes the default method for dealing with severe trauma, and we can potentially continue creating more alters well into adulthood, but it always starts in early childhood. The forms that the alters take are not by choice, but rather a subconscious level response to the nature of the trauma or the nature of the child's fantasies that they use to try to escape the trauma. For instance, in our case, we were born in a male body, but due to the fact that we didn't fit the mold of how boys should act, we were constantly mocked and ridiculed in our childhood about being girly. And so, as a result, we have more female than male alters in our system. Also, we also read science fiction and fantasy books and superhero comics to escape from the pain of the trauma. And so several of our alters took the form of alien, elves, mutants, etc. So I think that's the key paragraph is about understanding it. Is that the one thing that those of us who don't suffer or don't have DID, I don't even know if it's appropriate to say you suffer from it.
No, survive.
Those of us who don't have DID, well, just have it. I assume.
Yeah, that's true.
So those of us that don't have it is we don't look to when our self was like when we solidified like this idea that between the ages of 6 and 9 we're still finding our way, like because we're kids, we don't think about it, like what would have happened if we had a trauma at the time. My little sister was 8 when our mum died. Presumably that counts, like, but that wasn't her reaction to it, but it could have been.
Yeah for sure.
So there's always going to be something individual about it, but these are the things. It's like it's and in the same way as like your alters will be very personal because they're what you subconsciously urge to protect yourself, or what you know, like what bits of yourself you're pulling in from, and that's the one thing that, like, not only can someone outside it not judge based on that because they're very intensely personal, but I guess that's why the range, and that's the thing that we don't really get, because And you can't take from Moon Knight because it was clearly written by people who didn't understand this.
Oh no, yeah, it was a throwaway,
which is fine. And like,
yeah,
and well, as when we get into what Lena says about Moon Knight later, we'll talk about like how, you know, at one point these were literally just disguises for Mark.
Oh yeah, they plainly said that.
Then they go into the sort of the mental health aspect. So it's like it's all being in the same way as like the Thing was made Jewish retroactively, and we now all fit that in and take that in as like this is a given. He's like the most famous Jewish character. He wasn't always, you know. Is that these comics are they change and they don't stick to one, like they were never planned to last 50, 60 years when they started writing them. And we've learned a lot more about these things. So like is like, so what Lane is giving us is the fact and what it's like to live with DID, and then we're then going to try and retroactively fit Moon Knight into that and hope it works, and in some runs it'll be more successful, in others it won't. So, but it's like really interesting to me was that, well, those things specifically is that the severe and repeated trauma, which we never want to think of anyone we know having suffered. But it happens. Like we all know it happens. And how that then it also affects not just whether you develop DID, but how that manifests in the alters you have and when they turn up and their age, their sex, their gender, you know, like
all
those things.
Yeah, no, that is fascinating as well. And just going back to your other point about in the comics, it's almost as if we kind of get like time capsules of that era, you know, just with the way that they write. And, you know, we're not, as comic book readers and fans, I guess everyone who is in this realm knows of the word retcon and how comic books and characters are just consistently redone over and over in some way, you know, to some extent. So that's not unknown territory for the readers. So when we do get... Sorry? It's
really interesting with Moon Knight because, like, we, like me and Ray, we're coming at this. We're older than probably most of you listening to it. Me specifically. I'm a good 10 years older than Ray. But it's like we've watched how discussions of mental health have moved just in that period of, like, just say in the last 30 years when we were old enough to pay attention to how these things have changed. And it's really interesting that, like, we're taken with a character where that's so in the center of that sort of zeitgeist of like coming to understand mental health better. And we're clearly not there. I mean, there's still a lot of stigma attached to various mental health issues. But the fact that like now 15, 16-year-olds can talk about mental health without it being this like hidden thing that everyone's ashamed of, and it's still there a bit, I'm sure, but like compared to when we were growing up,
for sure,
you know, and we'll get into that as well.
I mean, you asked, you know, young Ray decades ago about, you know, why don't you just see a psychiatrist or psychologist, you know, about some issues that you might have, and that would be a thing of kind of shame. You know,
for
whereas
sure. I mean, my best friend went to a psychiatrist, and my best friend went to a psychiatrist for all kinds of behavioural reasons, and she was awful. She literally walked out the room. I went to one at age 3 because I'm like, that's how. If you're my hidden shame, I was referred to a psychiatrist at age 3, but I got hyperactivity diagnosis, which is now ADHD, and now very hard to get a diagnosis from, but I got it very, very simply, but like, this is what is wrong with your child, now change her food. And it was all managed by food. It was like, don't give her no sugar, no preservatives, and that will fix it. It was like no drugs, no like, and how that's changed.
No, it has, I'm just hoping that...
But also, you're right, like, people now will happily say they're going to therapy.
Yes,
we were referred to a family one after my mum died, and I've never wanted to not be in a room as much. You know, it's just like, well, you're going to tell me that I'm sad. Like, you know, there was such a revulsion against the whole idea of going to therapists.
Yeah, exactly.
when we were kids, and even into our 20s and 30s, probably. Like, and some of that leached over from America, where you started seeing people in American TV shows going to therapists. Or talking about going to therapists, and you're like, maybe it's just Brits that are like a little bit reticent and weird about this,
Yeah, I don't know. I put it down. Well, personally, I put it down to my partner Eve as well. I mean, I put it down to the Dutch. I don't know whether it's her group or not, but like her clique and stuff. When I first started going out with her, like over a decade ago. Was that, they'd go see a psychiatrist if they had some problems. And I first heard that, and it's not like
It's crazy.
I know, but it's not like
I'd be like, good crazy.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And Eve was going, look, people in Australia, they're too embarrassed or ashamed to go to a psychiatrist. You should. I mean, it's there to help you. Where people suffer, like I think a lot, as you say, Rebecca, a lot of people suffer in silence. Or they just try and just get on with it. Whereas we are now like a bit more, I guess, educated as a whole, that we do have the means to actually address this. So, it's an interesting thing. So I try to keep an open mind. I'm of the old school as well, but I try to embrace it. It's definitely there. It's like going to the doctors. Yeah,
it is, and it's just like you see how much people are helped by it. Like,
yeah.
It's like, it's one of those things that makes me think that I'm positive about the current era. There's a lot of negatives, but like compared to when I grew up, when it literally was stiff upper lip and don't mention it, and everything addressed to my dad about my hyperactivity were referring to things like Rebecca's problem.
Yeah, right.
And like, we'll only take her in school 2 days a week because of her problem. And like, it was very much like, she's a problem child. And it's like, no, it's like, I can't help it. I'm like 4 years old, whatever, like.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sorry, before we get into the next paragraph as well, it's really interesting as well, Rebecca, because it's timely too. So again, Eve's brother, Rick, he's got ADHD as well, and Eve reckons that she might have to some degree some of it as well. And she showed me this thing. It's so interesting because for a lot of women, with ADHD, it was previously seen as that, they're flighty or ditzy, or, they kind of were a bit careless. But in fact, if you look at it retrospectively, they could have had some form of ADHD, which would explain a lot.
My sister, my sister works is a mental health social worker. Which has been incredibly interesting for all of us. And, she was talking to me the other day and saying like that her boss just randomly told her that she thought she was on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
And she was just like, number one, weird thing for your boss to come out and say.
Exactly.
But, mental health social workers, they're quite open about these things.
Fair enough.
And it started off this whole discussion where she goes, well, I think you and Joe do as well. And I was like, what? Like, I don't want, do I? And then, so what I discovered from that chat is that the autism diagnosis for women is vastly different than the autism diagnosis for men.
Oh.
Like, the symptoms are different.
Right.
The way it manifests are different.
Oh, okay.
And because of that, it's incredibly underdiagnosed in women because they're, like with a lot of medical things, they just never considered that women might be different. It's like women have different symptoms for heart attack. And so a lot of women have had heart attacks where people didn't think they were going to have heart attacks because they didn't recognize the symptoms because they were only told the male symptoms. So this is where we're at the moment. That's the crossroads we're now at, is understanding how badly diagnosed women have been because they were just or not, that everyone just all the studies are done in men or majority men. And majority white men as well. Like, I mean, I was looking at it recently since I have a cold, the COVID symptoms. So what they've discovered in England, obviously we have a very high prevalence rate and have for a long time, plus a very high vaccination rate. So what they've discovered is that there are different symptoms by age, by gender, and by vaccination status.
Wow.
Yeah, so like I've been sneezing a lot.
Yeah.
And that is apparently a symptom you can have if you are only if you're vaccinated.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a symptom of non-vaccinated, but apparently women get different symptoms. These are all things. So that's kind of the next stage we have to go to.
Wow, it just gets a bit more.
And if you understand that's what's happening with the physical illnesses, like we're starting to get it with the heart attacks, because there's big campaigns in the UK now that like chest pain for women can mean a heart attack.
Yeah.
So now they're starting to, and then with the autism and probably ADHD, I'm guessing manifest differently in women. Like all these things, we're gonna start getting better about. If you widen the diversity of the group being looked at,
yes,
you'll get a better understanding of like all, and you might find that there's different symptoms by along racial and ethnic lines, along gender lines. It's really interesting, and it's just like it's kind of crazy how many of these blinkered screens we had, and we thought we were doing great.
Yeah.
And like we were doing great, but it's just like the more you understand, and it does make it like overwhelming, but it also like when you want to actually sort of diagnose people properly, you've got to start understanding that. In the same way as like vaccines need to be tested on everyone.
Yeah.
Like you need to make sure that everyone's involved in the trials, even down to things like the PPE didn't fit women because they created all the masks and stuff for men.
Right.
They didn't fit women health workers as well. It's just crazy. So anyway, that's a bit of a deviation. Sorry about that, everyone.
No. It's fascinating. It's amazing. I guess the takeaway is we shouldn't just like blanket diagnose everyone now. It's a lot more complicated.
Yeah, it's just like we're learning so much about everything.
Which is fantastic.
And it's quite an exciting, like, for the next generation is that they're going to go into this with their eyes more wide open. And, if we take away the sort of stigma of going to therapists, maybe people get the help sooner and they won't be as much. I mean, look, people are still going to suffer traumas.
Yes,
that happens.
Of course.
I mean, look what's happening around the world. There are traumatic events everywhere.
Yes.
But maybe we can actually get people the help they need without thinking them weak or, and everyone benefits by a society being more understanding.
Yeah, it's kind of like in DID, this case as well, not trying to like solve it so much, and get rid of it, but in actually managing it and actually,
I thought that was also incredibly interesting. Is not just the diagnosis, but then it's like, then how do you deal with it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just a matter of like squashing it and getting rid of it. There should never be this baseline about trying to make everyone normal in inverted commas. Because as we're beginning to learn, there isn't really a normal. No, that's right. There isn't, and there are vastly different amounts of people. As Lena said as well, as the human race, there's vastly. Yeah. If you look within DID, there's just a vast range as well. So it's a lot more complicated than just generalizing. So anyway, let's go on. So as Lena said, with this understanding of how DID is formed, we can begin to see that the portrayal of Mark Spector's formation of his identities in the early Mensch comics was far from accurate, as we've probably mentioned, Rebecca.
I think that's very charitable.
From several of the conversations that Stephen Grant and the other identities had with Marlene, it seems that these identities started out as just aliases that Mark was using to be able to infiltrate different types of social structures. Marlene would jokingly call him her schizo, which is both an offensive slur and inaccurate, since schizophrenia is a completely different disorder from DID. But in the next breath, she would express genuine concern that these aliases that Mark was using were starting to become all too real. If they really were aliases that Mark invented in his adult life, Marlene needn't have worried. It's impossible to invent a DID system on purpose, especially in adulthood. So yeah, I think here, Rebecca, as we kind of alluded to, Elaine is, I guess, retrospectively looking at it and trying to understand it, but A large part of it is, as we say, just a sign of the times, of what their understanding was.
Look. Marlene's not the only person who's used schizo as a sort of as a kind of jokey thing. It was a thing, and a really bad thing, and like Lena points out, it's a completely different disorder. But yeah, and it's but it is interesting that this is now when we go into that development of they started off as aliases. We were never too sure.
Yeah.
So this becomes the story of how Moon Knight developed into I'm guessing there was a point at which they could have decided they never wanted to touch mental health in the comics.
Well,
if they wanted to.
Mark Spector Moon Knight totally just did away with it. Yeah, so 60 issues of not dealing with it, basically.
Yeah. So let's carry on. However, it's possible that the aliases were actually alters all along, which I think is probably how we all read it now.
Yes.
It's the easiest way of and they had been they'd been around since Mark's childhood. He just didn't realise it. That's certainly the way that more recent writers like Lemire and Bemis have handled it, and it's not really all that unrealistic. DID is a coping mechanism that is made for hiding our pain from others and from ourselves. That includes hiding the truth of our multiplicity from ourselves. Many DID systems have no idea that they're multiple until well into their adulthood. We're one of the lucky ones in that we first discovered that we were multiple when we were 18 years old, which is younger than most.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I guess it goes back to that being one of the symptoms being amnesia, that you don't realise that you're switching.
Yes. Yeah, they do mention
that sort of hiding.
Yeah, they mentioned about the blackouts and stuff again in that Beauty After Bruises thing, which they dispel. I can't remember off the top of my head why.
It's also hard because it's hard to imagine people being in that kind of pain and having to hide it.
Yeah, imagine that, hiding from yourself and from
and
everyone else.
But we all hide things in different ways. So I guess this is what's different is not suffering the same repeated level of trauma and not coping with it in that way. So but it does make it hard because I don't know, you don't want to think of anyone in any kind of pain.
Absolutely. I no, gosh, to be totally I guess just to liken it to something that's very different, but kind of in the physical sense, whenever, Rebecca, I see someone in a moon boot or something, I always look at it going, oh God, there was a time, there was a moment in time when that person was under extreme pain, and it's I feel sorry for them, because you see someone walking around and they've got the boot on and they've kind of semi-recovered and it's become more of a hindrance than anything, but there was a moment in time when that when that ankle snapped or that leg broke, and it's oh, that's terrible. Anyway. So if we assume that Mark had actual DID all along, even during the early Mensch stories, then interestingly enough, even though the DID was not portrayed accurately back then, it was actually portrayed more positively than many of the later runs. The way the alters worked together was a good example of something called functional multiplicity. This is a relatively newer method of pursuing healing for a DID system. So this was something I was kind of referring to, Rebecca, which they're using now to try and, manage DID.
Yeah. It's actually really so. Let's carry on. In years past, the main goal for DID healing was something called either integration or final fusion, which meant fusing or merging all of the alters back into one identity. And you can understand that would be perhaps what somebody would think was the right and healthy thing to do. But in more recent years, many DID systems and therapists have been starting to realise this method doesn't always work for everybody. It certainly never worked for us, even though we tried it for about the first 9 years of our therapy. For us, it was easier and more productive to pursue functional multiplicity, which means that we're still multiple, but we try to improve our communication and cooperation with each other and learn to work together to pursue common goals for our shared life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something interesting. Again, I'm going to refer to Beauty After Bruises as well, which mentions this. And there's a common myth that DID happens when someone, of a sound mind faces something and their mind is shattered into various personalities, which is an absolute myth. Now, the idea is it's actually the opposite. It's actually that those personalities have never been able to consolidate in those formative years into one single thing. So by reading that paragraph there, Rebecca, it's almost as if this, what they were doing before with integration or final fusion, they were actually trying to do something that the body and the mind had never actually done before, you know what I mean? So it seems quite a difficult thing to do.
It does sound very much like let's make you more like us.
But how hard, how hard would that be, knowing now that, they're trying to repair something that was never in that state before, you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's, I don't know, yeah, it's, interesting. But, functional multiplicity, I guess, is the way that a lot of more contemporary, therapists are going, approaching DID, that do know about DID.
Yeah. Sorry.
We're going to get a sneeze.
Yeah, I'm really trying not to sneeze.
Okay,
but yeah, like Lena says, it can be different for different people, but that seems more like allowing people to live with the situation they have and to make it work for them rather than trying to force something on them.
Yes, exactly.
Which generally seems healthier.
Yeah, exactly. Not become one of us, everyone's different, let's just embrace that and see how you can manage, day-to-day stuff and how to function properly, that sort of stuff. Yeah. Anyway, Moon Knight in the early Mensch stories was actually a very positive example of this type of cooperation. The four identities pretty much had one common set of goals, fighting crime and protecting the innocent, and each of them had their own role to play in pursuing those goals. Mark Spector had the military training and mercenary experience, as well as connections with the intelligence community, such as his Israeli intelligence friend Benjamin Abramov from issues 17 to 20 of Moon Knight Volume 1. Jake Lockley had the street-level connections and informants, such as Crawley and Jenner's sons, and Stephen Grant provided the financing for their missions and had the business prowess and social graces needed to handle those finances. And of course, Moon Knight was the final expression of that mission as the one who was out there actually fighting the criminals. They were fully aware of each other and worked together seamlessly as an effective crime-fighting team. Of course, if you see it as one man using aliases, it's not surprising that they could work together so well. But if you interpret it as a DID system, it is actually an impressive display of functional multiplicity, without the tropes and stigmas of being crazy or dangerously unstable that would haunt later iterations of the character.
Indeed.
Yeah, so, it is funny. Again, interesting as well, because another thing, again, that I learnt from that other article that Lena said was that you can't flick it on, you can't switch it on and off. You can't flick between identities, which is apparently what a lot of people thought. You can just somehow coax someone into their other identity, or you can trigger it, but that's not so much the case. With here, it's interesting though, because if we are to treat the early Mark Spector Moon Knight as a DID case, he really had a handle on his identities. And again, I'd like to ask this to Lena as well, with this functional multiplicity that coupled with this, I guess, ability to to draw from your alters, because that was written as an absolute myth in that Beauty After Bruises, but it seems to be that that's kind of the goal for functional multiplicity. So yeah, Lena, I'm just wondering if that is, again, I might be way off track, but is that what the kind of parallels we're looking at? The goals with the functional multiplicity working, managing to cooperate with each other. Anyway.
Right, so we'll get to the final paragraph. It's highly doubtful that Doug Munch intended Moon Knight to be a positive depiction of a functionally multiple DID system. After all, in a text piece about the origins of Moon Knight that he wrote for issue 15 called Shades of Moon Knight, pretty much the only mention he makes of DID is saying, perhaps I created the guy too soon after reading Flora Schreiber's Sybil. It really was a touchstone sort of moment.
I've got to read it.
I'd say try and dig out the film, but it's on TV show or whatever it was, but it's really traumatic. So, Ralph Macchio, editor for a lot of those early stories, also confirmed in an interview with the Epic Marvel podcast that both he and Mensch intended Moon Knight's identities to be aliases, not actual DID. But nevertheless, I still think it's an interesting thought exercise to look at the stories in the light of DID and see them as an example of how a DID system can be effective in pursuing the goals without being insane or dangerously unstable. And I think that's really interesting, but I also think it's interesting that Marvel eventually, fairly quickly, I think, decided to keep the DID side. Whether they were calling it DID, it took them a while to call it DID, but they didn't immediately retcon to aliases. Decide, no, we're not going to have any mental health issues with this guy, which they could have done at the time.
Definitely,
like we said, it was much more of a stigma, but the fact that they actually considering the grief we give comic book companies now about representation, this seems quite an early, and maybe they didn't intend it, but the fact that they allowed it, they pivoted that way, and so it's become let's face it, if you ask people about Moon Knight, it's probably one of the first things they'll say.
That's it, is
the identities. When they're not saying the B word, and or Jewish, but they're the three columns, they're the three pillars that you would get if somebody said, I don't know. I think we joke about it, but I actually don't think many people would refer to him as Batman. I think that's become a comic circle almost inside joke.
Yeah,
I've
come across it a lot.
If I was going to tell my friends who Moon Knight was ahead of the TV show, I would probably say he's Jewish, he has DID, he wears white. So the enemies can see him coming, and he's pretty violent, or mentions something to do with the supernatural side. I mean, because the thing about comparing to Batman is it doesn't really say anything. You have to define what you mean by he's like Batman. What he fights in a suit, so
it's very superficial.
I mean, it's very to me, it's much more stand out that he wears white because they all wear dark suits, but it's just what are you even saying when you're comparing him to that? I guess they're saying he's rich and he's got gadgets. I'm guessing.
The Crescent Darts do it, and Stephen Grant, that sort of thing.
But then so does Iron Man.
Exactly.
Although, did you listen? You heard that podcast where somebody said that to me, and I went off it. If anybody wants to hear a funny podcast about me getting upset when somebody compared Iron Man to Batman, I will tell you where to go listen to that. I just it's very odd because the other thing about Batman is he's absolutely the center of DC. Yeah. So to compare any non-A-list character to him is just frankly ridiculous. It's if you look at how many comics that. So anyway, I personally think that's more we've allowed it to become a joke, and comics people say it, but like only comic person would even question what you mean by that. Like,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
If I said that to a non-comics person, they'd be like, "Why have I never heard of him then?"
Yeah.
Oh, because you've got the Dark Knight versus Moon Knights. They both have Knight in the title.
Yeah,
but Batman doesn't really have the Dark Knight in his title either. That's just it's a comic title. So I'll get more angry about it later. But
I just say, just show any of the casual viewers, just show them that leaked photo. So look, does that look like him?
Does that look like that? Yeah. Is this your
exactly.
But I think it's interesting that like they could have pulled back quite early on and said these are definitely aliases.
Yeah.
But they allowed creative teams at a time when editorial was probably a little bit more involved than they are now. And now it's become a defining factor. Like, and if you ask for comic book characters with mental health interest, then he'll almost always come up as one of the first.
Absolutely,
which is incredible.
Yeah. I think it's because the character was allowed to. Because I pinpointed it back to someone asked me as well, and I tried to pinpoint when it was openly, like Moon Knight was openly had DID, and it's not really until 2006. It's not that.
Yeah, no, I think before that you get it from. You don't get it for things like Marlene calling him Schizo and stuff like that.
It's very ambiguous. Yeah.
Which is the run where he's not sure if Khonshu's real or not. Or in his mind. But there's some of that kind of like where he's got all that self-doubt about...
Oh, yeah, that was Volume 1. Yeah, that was Volume 1, early with Midnight Man. Midnight Man. Yep.
Yeah, when he kind of loses some of that awareness about
there
himself.
Was a little bit of that, wasn't there? And he held up a skull, he was on top of a building, he was reciting Hamlet or something. Yeah, absolutely. But I think, if you look at even if it's 2006, that's relatively kind of early. Now you get the likes of big hitters like the Incredible Hulk, and you get like Nadia Van Dyne, the Wasp, where mental illness is quite and pronounced in that. The Hulk now has DID as well, which makes sense considering all the different Hulks that have arisen from Bruce Banner.
The Immortal Hulk makes it make sense, which is important. Like, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the next volume of the Hulk.
Yeah,
what happened? Yeah,
with Lunatics. Yeah.
Well, just generally, where it's like it's a little bit like where do you go after the Lemire run with Moon Knight, where you've clearly placed your flag in the sand.
God, it's good. Yeah, exactly.
And then you have to follow that.
I know it's going to be a hard act to follow.
And creators, the nature of the beast is to try and put your own stamp on it. And it's very hard when you follow a seminal run, and Immortal Hulk has absolutely been a seminal run. It'd be interesting if they keep the DID, which obviously I hope they do, because I don't think you should ever retcon that kind of thing out of someone.
Yeah. No.
But if they, Lena says, sorry, I'm really sorry, I'm so sick. If they make it, if the creators go learn a bit more about it and give it, and if we get Hulk Moon Knight having some sharing a therapist or
with
something,
Leonard Samson, Doc Samson, that'd be great.
Yeah, Doc Samson, another Jewish character.
Anyway, there's not too much more in this article, just a final sign-off from Lena. So she says, that's all I have for now, but I will write again. And until then, may Khonshu watch over the denizens of the night. So a huge thank you to Lena for submitting this. I know Lena's already submitted Article 2 as well, which Rebecca... we might... I'm just tentatively saying, maybe with every precursor to the Jed McKay issue coming up, as an idle chat, we just do we kind of fit this in, because I think it's really interesting. We've, as you can see, listeners, we've kind of gone a bit over what our usual duration is, because it is such an interesting subject, and I hope you find it interesting as well. So I mean, just another little tidbit. Again, I'm gonna plug this non-profit organisation, Beauty After Bruises in Pennsylvania. They deal with survivors of childhood trauma, and as I've mentioned throughout, Rebecca and I both mentioned throughout reading Lena's article, there's some really interesting tidbits in there as well. So I think I've mentioned most of them. One of the other thing as well, like other things here that I've got in notes. It's a myth as well that the alters communicate with almost a hallucinogenic kind of thing. So we saw in that Lemire run, Rebecca, that the young Mark had a conversation with Steve. That's kind of dispelled, really. They don't do that sort of thing. It's apparently more of a just like a louder voice kind of thing, presence in the mind. And what, again, I found very interesting was this is a total myth that DID is rare. There's actually a lot more people with the idea out there than
super interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So a fascinating article. What I'll do is that I've already spoken to Lena, I'll place her article up on our website as well as a link and the text to this article from Beauty After Bruises. It's a fascinating read. Loonies, have a read if you can, and get yourself acquainted with it, because we're going to dive more into DID as we go on. It's just a really fascinating subject. Well, Rebecca, unless there's any other final kind of thoughts on it, did you have any
No,
other...
I just want to say thank you again to Lena and everyone, and for helping us through this. And please tell us if we said anything
absolutely
wrong or especially offensive.
Yes,
because
please.
I would hate to do that.
I know. Yes,
and I apologize if I did.
Me too. I probably did say something offensive that I was unaware of.
No,
I apologize.
I just feel like I'm not sure.
Yeah,
me
too.
I did, and
Exactly.
I don't want to ever come at this point where I offend anyone. But please all send in questions and comments about the episode.
Absolutely.
And if there's anything you specifically want to know, any issues of Moon Knight you want to flag up for us for Lena to have a look at in reference to DID, and hopefully we'll all come out about this knowing a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. And I might, I don't know, just have to think how I'm going to do this. I'll put something up on our social media platforms where you can drop in your thoughts if you want to get in contact. So just we have them all in like one spot. So for Lena to easily access and maybe address some questions that you might have. But yeah, a totally fascinating thing. I'm forever grateful that Lena reached out, and I can't wait to
super grateful.
Yeah, can't wait to look for to discuss more of her articles. Rebecca, I'm just going to jump to Nightlines before we get to spectacles. Just because we've got one quick one there. With Idle Chats, just some feedback from random episodes. So from YouTube, a big shout out again to CMK7. Beep boop, beep boop, boop. Chris, thank you so much, Chris, for writing in. You are awesome. I love receiving this feedback. And I know, you're an avid listener. So this was based on episode 225. This was Justin and I's recounting of Moon Knight Volume 1, Issue 19, which Elena actually mentioned. It was to do with Assault on Island Strange. Great review, guys. I loved how this issue resembles a James Bond movie more so than a superhero comic. International intrigue, evil mastermind, beautiful femme fatales, elite assassins, it's got it all. Do you think we'll ever see a return to more of this international Moon Knight in the future? I bloody hope so. I love this aspect of it. I do. Do you like it, Rebecca? I love how he goes around the globe.
I absolutely love it.
I think it's...
I love it, like when we were doing with that episode with him with the CIA contacts.
Yeah.
So good.
Like,
so fun.
No other heroes are kind of doing that. They kind of all stick to New York. Anyway, I sure hope so. Also, I was surprised you guys didn't mention the part where Moon Knight spits on defeated Arsenal's unconscious face in an emotional FU display. I don't think we'll be seeing that sort of thing in Disney Plus. Let's hope we do, Chris. I
absolutely think we will. I don't think we'll get any face ripped off, but I think we'll get some thing in the face. To be fair, though, since COVID, spitting on the face.
That's true. That's true.
maybe a bit,
That is true. Actually, good point, Rebecca.
I'm sure we'll get some FU displays.
I was thinking, though, that is such a funny thing, because I almost see it as a rite of passage for actors, because whenever you see a TV show or a movie, Rebecca, and someone spits on someone's face, I always have a little chuckle, because, it's like, it's a bit of a trope. Anyway. Anyway, listeners, thank you so much for sticking with us in this episode and listening through this fascinating topic. Spectacle, Rebecca, any plugs you want to give before we dash out?
I don't know. Check out DCAU podcast on The Dark Knight Returns if you want the first Dark Knight Returns film. If you want to hear me have a rant about why Iron Man is not. But
just listen to it like that. We'll have to timestamp it. I'm gonna have to.
Yeah. I will actually have to timestamp it at some point. It was very funny. We had a massive fan of and just dropped that into some comment, and I was like, not gonna stand for it.
Yeah. I've got to catch up on my podcast just to be totally thinking, Rebecca, because I got a new phone and it's got one of those USB-Cs, and you have to listen with your headphones with the USB-C thing. So,
that's so annoying. Yeah. I'm just like, I used to be able to listen to podcasts while I work, and I can't now. I don't know why my attention span's not the same. So I'm always like really behind on podcasts. So
yeah,
I understand.
Yeah, I mean, when
there's so many of them.
They are, and when they really get into good discussion, it does kind of distract a little. I find when I have it on at work as well. Anyway, that's a good thing. Also, I wanted to shout out as well, Loonies. You may have seen it on the website, on the Facebook page.
The big news.
Yeah, the big news, bigger than the leak.
The real big news.
We finally have a website, so just check out itkmoonnight.com. So very happy with that, and it's all thanks to the Patroonies as well. It's one of the goals that I placed up there if we reach a certain mark, and we have. So very happy with that. Go check it out. And now our email is simply feedback@itkmoonnight.com. It's easy to remember. Just plug in your thoughts, send them on over. So yeah, very happy with that. Also as well, I just want to give, before when this episode comes out, there'll be probably like a day left, but a big shout out to Moon Knight Origins. So this is off the back of the bonus episode that I had a chat with the director, Ian Adama and Stephen Huff, who plays Mark Spector. They're on Indiegogo looking to get pledges so they can fund their fan film of Moon Knight. It looks awesome. They've announced a couple of castings. So they've cast Jenna and they've cast Bushman, which looks the actors look brilliant in it. We've got some stills of Moon Knight and Steve Huff as Mark Spector and Jake Lockley. It's all looking really good. So please consider, you've only got a day or so to drop in a contribution, and any help will go a long way. I'd love to see this film start. And yeah, Rebecca, I mean, have you been following any Moon Knight fan films and stuff around? I know it's probably...
I haven't. I've not had a lot of time. But every time I see it mentioned or hear it mentioned on the podcast, I want to.
It looks really
good.
That
might be something that I actually put out some time this week.
Yep.
And catch up on.
Cool. No, awesome. And so
I fully support the whole idea. I think it's great.
I think it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, please, dude, just check it out, Loonies, on the links in the show notes to the Indiegogo page. Just see, there's a trailer there. It looks really good, some stills. It's all good. So next phase, there is, we're not going to worry about the phase of the moon because it's a new comic book review. How cool is that?
Yay!
And it will be, yes, the next issue, highly anticipated. I've already pre-ordered mine, of Moon Knight issue 2 by Jed MacKay and Alessandro Cappuccio. Rebecca, have you thought, there are a couple of variants. Have you decided, are you going to get just the regular one or...
No, I'm getting the Peach Momoko one.
Oh, yes, I've ordered that. That looks very nice, doesn't it?
Yeah, I ordered that straight away. It took me longer to decide on the issue 1 variant than it did on the
bloody
issue
hundreds.
2 ones. Yeah.
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 But barring any, hopefully, Rebecca, if Rebecca, you're feeling much better and you don't get any worse, I guess, hopefully we'll have you on there later in the week so we can talk about this issue too.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
It's going to be awesome. Hopefully we'll answer some, or maybe just raise more questions. I don't know. So
yeah, we're still very early on in the run.
It's still very early. I know.
Not expecting too many answers. So
exactly. But no, that should be good. But yeah, Rebecca, thank you so much. It's always good, and thank you so much for, battling on. Jeez. Hope you have a nice lemon and honey tea for the
exactly
day.
What we're going for next.
No, but a big thanks.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I'm sorry to everyone for the huskiness and the sneezing. Well, not sneezing, but the coughing.
No worries. No, and as always, may Khonshu watch over the denizens of the night. I might just go forward to a pre-recorded. Hopefully, I do this. But anyway, listeners, catch you later.
Take care. Bye bye.
Please consider checking out our Into the Night Patreon page on patreon.com/ITKMoonKnight. There are plenty of incentives there, like uncut material, bonus episodes, and more, and any contribution will help expand the show. We're sponsored by Fringe Knight by Daniel Doing, and you can support his Patreon page at patreon.com/FringeKnight27. Also, Tombz by Drew Tombz can be supported via his SoundCloud website on soundcloud.com/Tombz with a Z. Drew Tombz also produces horror and sci-fi based music on LURKMUSIC. That's LURKMUSIC with a CK. And you can support his music on Bandcamp at lurkmusic.bandcamp.com. We're also sponsored by Dreamland Comics, the superhero superstore. Use the code MOON to get a promo of 20% off any online back issues. Finally, we're part of The Collective, which is an informal network of like-minded podcasters. It's a repository of ideas, and we also like crossing over and supporting each other. Please check out all of these shows in our show notes under The Collective. Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Material used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.